Okay, hello, welcome to a video. I make a chess video. I am from Iceland, I am Fitamaster Ingvar Johannesson, and now we look at video, okay? So in this video we're going to look at a game by David Bronstein, a man who many consider one of the best players ever not to have become world champion. He famously drew a match against Botvinnik 12-12, where he held the upper hand at the end of that match. And there are some conspiracies that he had to sort of throw his advantage away, some KGB theories, but maybe we'll get into that later. But Bronstein, very famous player, very creative player. So, you know, as a player, he made of course a world championship final, which he could have won, maybe should have. And he was also a well-respected author. His book on the 1953 Candidates Tournament in Zurich is one of the more famous tournament books around. And he also introduced some very interesting ideas, especially in the King's Indian. And in the game we're going to look at today, he played the Old Indian. Perhaps not super successfully, but the Old Indian and the King's Indian will share some ideas and structures. His opponent in this game was Mikenas. Strong opponent. You don't make the final of the Soviet Championship without being a very strong player. And he does have, for instance, a variation named after him, the Mikenas attack, which is in the English opening. But okay, Mikenas opened with d4, and we're going to look at the game from Bronstein's perspective. He had the black pieces, and he plays d6. So from here, of course, you could go for the King's Indian if you play g6, but in this game he played c6, going for structures with e5. And black usually does not fear the endgame here, which Mikenas did not go for. This endgame is generally considered quite okay for black. The king will find shelter on c7, and white will regret having moved his pawn to c4, because the d4 square gives black a target which he can easily play for. In the game, Mikenas went for d5, grabbing the space. Bishop e7 now. So like we said, this resembles a King's Indian structure, except the bishop is on e7 instead of g7. So slight differences, but there are many things that the structures will have in common. Bishop e2, Bronstein castled, knight to f3, knight to a6, eyeing the c5 square from where you can attack pawn on e4, castles, and bishop d7, which doesn't seem like a very useful move. I mean, this doesn't really improve the scope of the bishop in any way, but Bronstein had an inventive maneuver in mind, which we'll see soon after knight to e1. A fairly standard move in structures where you have space like this. You want to put the knight on d3, and this supports, you know, both pawn pushes that you can make on the king side and the queen side. Now queen c8, the point of bishop d7, and again the point isn't immediately obvious, but if you think about it, what is the idea behind these maneuvers of these pieces on the light squares? Assuming you took time to figure it out, the idea is to reroute this bishop to a better diagonal here on b6, a much better diagonal, instead of the bishop being on e7 and staying passive. So knight d3 now, white continues with his plan, and bishop to d8. f4 now by Mikenas. When you play f4 in structures like these, especially in the Czech Benoni, when this pawn is here on c5, you have to be careful about black controlling the e5 square. But here that doesn't seem to be the case. If you take on f4, in general you would control the e5 square if you had a knight on d7, maybe a rook on e8 or a queen here on e7. But here the case is simply that your pieces are too far away from d7 and you have a bishop there, so you're not controlling e5. So this is probably a pretty decent idea for white, but let's see what happens. Bronstein strikes in the center, so he takes d5. Knight c5 now, hitting the pawn on e4. And Mikenas takes on e5, but Bronstein takes on e4. So we have some trades in the center. Material is still equal. But black doesn't have to worry about e6. He will just take it, and he takes d6. At the moment, you have the knight covering, and this would leave white with a potentially weak and vulnerable d-pawn. So Mikenas takes on e4 and plays bishop to e3. Now here, finally, after well, a lot of maneuvering, at last we see this bishop improve, go to b6. And despite taking on double pawns, Bronstein feels that the weakening of this diagonal, which happens now, bishop takes b6, of this diagonal, and the black squares is in black's favor, so he's willing to take on this double pawn. Also, the rook is activated on the a file, which gives him some tactical opportunities. Rook c1 looks like the natural move here, and maybe that's what Mikenas should have done. Queen d8, and then he has to take care of the pawn, but you know, black has some ideas, maybe even bishop a4, and the game goes on. But in the game, Mikenas went with rook f4, and probably nothing wrong with that, and Bronstein goes knight back to c5. Here Mikenas elects to take on d6, and well, black could play queen b8 and then win the pawn, hoping that this will become a weakness, but Bronstein elects to take on d3 and give a check on c5. Double attack. The king must move, goes to the corner, and we take on d6. So material is equal, and probably the game as well. But things will happen fast now. Mikenas goes for rook h4. His rook was attacked, and he moves it to h4. Of course, threatening mate on h7, so h6. And now he wants to get this rook into the game. But to do that, you have to worry about the a pawn, which is attacked because of the double pawns on the b file, which opened up the a8 rook. So a3 is played. Rook f to e8. Doesn't seem like much, but there is a threat. Queen e7, which is a double attack on the rook and on the bishop. So naturally the bishop moves to f3, gets out of harm's way, and protecting the pawn on d5, the potential weakness. But now queen e5. Probably played slowly, and you know, maybe a hand here, and looking into the crowd, not much going on, right? Well, I know you see that I'm threatening queen e1. It's a threat because, let's say we play a move like, well, hard to make, a blank move, rook here. I give you a check, and you can't take because of the mate, so you would have to play queen f1, but now your rook hangs. So you see that your rook is hanging, so you must do something about that. And white does have good options. He could play his rook to d4, queen to d4. They both protect the rook and take care of the attack on b2. This is kind of a double attack. But the white found another way, which, well, seemingly prevents both his rook from being attacked on h4 and protecting b2. And that is rook to b4. But this is where Bronstein's heart must have started pounding. Is it really happening? Did he fall for it? He fell for it, but what did he fall for? Take a moment and find this wonderful move that Bronstein played here. David, what did you do? So Bronstein with black played an outstanding move. A move that, well, once I tell you there's a possible move here, you might find it, but the move just seems so completely impossible. Rook takes a3. And this is just amazing. There are 3 pieces that can take the rook, but each loses. Let's take them in turn. Rook takes a3. You no longer have protection of the back rank. You get mated. B takes a3. This reveals that the pawn is pinned and we can take here. And what's worse, I've played rook b1, I play rook here. And again, you're losing material. Well, you're actually getting mated. You can't even play here because I have this wonderful x-ray. And finally, queen takes a3. You no longer have queen to f1. And again, the back rank costs you the game. Finally, you can't move the rook because your queen is hanging. It's game over. And moving the queen. Well, you'd have to protect the rook, but then I simply take, and again the back rank decides the game. So an absolutely outstanding move by David Bronstein, and yeah, maybe not the most spectacular game, but this move makes it a classic. And I really enjoyed this move. I hope you enjoyed the move and the game. And I'll see you in the next video, guys. Bye bye.